This season is definitely about Saul taking over. And that's why I wouldn't be surprised if we see him get the Cadillac. So what do I feel is left after he officially becomes Saul? What more would we see? I'm G, and this is the G Spot. Well, what they're showing us this season is we're not just getting the story to how Jimmy becomes Saul. We're also getting the story as to how Jimmy becomes involved with Walter White. This was made very apparent in episodes 2 and 3, the end of 2, the beginning of 3. In my video on episode 2, I talked about how Jimmy busts in on a lot of people in episode 2. It's a tactic of Saul's to trap people to get what he wants out of them. And the last time we saw him do this type of thing was in the first episode. Actually, it's the end of the first episode and part of the beginning of the second episode. We see him bust in on Tuco. He's busting in on Tuco because he's trying to get what he wants from the Kettlemans, and it's all a big mistake, and the Kettlemans don't live there, and it ends up being Tuco's house. So Jimmy gets himself in a lot of trouble by busting in on Tuco. He gets himself trapped in that house. He also gets himself trapped into the cartel at this moment. This is reinforced in the guy for this when he's brought to Lalo, and he's like, okay, I'm going to talk first, and I know I did this with Nacho, but I tried, and Lalo doesn't say no, but he's not there because of his involvement with Nacho. Jimmy is there because of his involvement with Tuco, and that's when Lalo brings up, Tuco told me about this, told me about you, and all this stuff. So it's this habit of Jimmy busting in on people when Jimmy's not really aware of what he's getting himself into. If Jimmy was aware that was Tuco's house, it's unlikely he would have busted in. But Jimmy's habit is just bust in first and figure out what's happening after. It's a bad habit. Why do I think any of this has anything to do with Jimmy meeting Walter White? Well, because of this. As I've been thinking about how they're going to tie this all together, there's one big scene in Breaking Bad, the episode it's called Better Call Saul. It's when Walt and Jesse meet Saul for the first time, and Saul's in the desert, and he mentions Nacho's name and Lalo's name, and he says that he's a friend of the cartels, which was in the 7th episode. Lalo says, do you want to be a friend of the cartels? And so he in this episode of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Saul says to Jesse and Walt when they have him in the desert, I am a friend of the cartels. So they hire him to get Badger out of jail. Now the thing is as far as Walt and Jesse are concerned at this point, their relationship is over with Saul. Then Saul hunts Walt down. He finds him at school and busts in on him in his classroom. Why does Jimmy go back to Walt? What did Jimmy see in Walt that attracted him to Walt? Very obviously, Walt and Jesse, neither of them knew what they were doing. They were both kind of amateur. They were amateurs, and Saul could see that they were amateurs when they do that whole desert thing. So, although the first time Saul and Walt meet is Walt going to Saul, that's not what starts the relationship. What starts the relationship is Saul going to Walt that one day when Walt is in his classroom. If we go to Better Call Saul, Season 5, Episode 3, the guy for this, we get this shot here of Saul in the back of Nacho's car. Now, I haven't exactly pinpointed the theme of Episode 3, but it has something to do with what's between you and what you want. If you go through Episode 3, there's a lot of fences in Episode 3. They're all over the place. And the fences are between people, fence, and then it's what the person wants. So the theme is something around this, okay? And what we see in this shot, when Saul's in the back of Nacho's car, is Saul sitting right in front of the star. And Saul wants to be a star. He reinforces this in Episode 7 when he tells Kim, being a friend of the cartel means news coverage and all this stuff. Saul wants to be a star. So Saul's sitting right in front of the star. And then on the outside of these stars are two skulls, danger. And then on the other side of these skulls are money. So in this episode where we see people being separated, something being between people and what they want, we see that there is danger between Jimmy and the money that he wants. We also see that Jimmy is getting himself in danger in this season, getting involved with the cartel. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, are there any hints in this season as to how things are going to work out for Jimmy? And yeah, there's one really huge hint that things are not going to work out for Jimmy at all. And it's in episodes 2 and 3 again. So in episode 2, Saul successfully traps Suzanne in the elevator and gets everything he wants. And he's walking out and he is feeling unbeatable. And that's when Nacho pulls up and reminds him that you're not unbeatable and you're going to do whatever I say. Get in. And Jimmy gets in and he drops his ice cream cone. So his ice cream cone was his prize, his reward. It was his enjoyment, but he doesn't get to eat it. He has to leave it behind. Then in episode 3, not only did he have to leave his ice cream cone behind, but an army of ants eats his ice cream cone instead of him. So Jimmy's not going to get the reward he thinks he's going to get by being a friend of the cartel. It's going to be taken from him. And I 100% believe that's what that ice cream cone represents. The really bad news for Jimmy and the ice cream cone is we get a shot right here of this heel walking by it. This is Kim's heel. I can't say 100% that this is Kim, and I know that this is a common heel, but still they made the decision to put this heel walking by the ice cream cone. And if this is Kim, then what we take from this is that Kim is just walking by Jimmy suffering, or Jimmy losing, or Jimmy being eaten alive, or any of these phrases that we want to use to describe this idea of an army getting Jimmy's reward instead of Jimmy getting it. So to me, Saul is headed for big trouble with the cartel. And in the end, when it all blows up in his face and he loses everything that he thought he was going to get, he's also going to lose Kim. He's not going to have Kim's sympathy. She's just going to walk away from him. And I really don't know if that's true or not. I'm very undecided about if Saul walks away from Kim or if Kim walks away from Saul. But when I look at this scene, I see Kim walking away from Saul and leaving Saul behind. It kind of hurt. So if that's where Saul is headed, and all of this involvement with the cartel, if this is all going to blow up in his face and he's going to end up losing in the end, then Saul's going to need to turn somewhere after all this is over. He's going to need to somehow rebuild. Now, when Walt and Jesse first meet Saul, he is a friend of the cartels. So if this whole business with Lalo and everything that he has going on blows up in his face and leaves him the loser in the situation, if he loses everything that he was working for, like he lost his ice cream cone, then it doesn't happen until after the desert. Because in the desert, he says, I'm a friend of the cartels. So all of this falling apart for Saul has to happen after that time in the desert. So let's say it happens a week after, and then the next time we see Saul in Breaking Bad is when he goes to Walt and says, we can make money together. So the whole reason why Jimmy ends up going to Walt is because everything that he's planning right now, everything that he sees happening because of becoming a friend of the cartel, blows up in his face, leaves him without anything, and he needs to turn to somebody else to start over, to rebuild. And the person that he turns to is Walter White. So in conclusion, Jimmy Saul is headed towards big trouble. Things with the cartel are not going to work out for him, and they're actually going to go so bad that eventually Saul is going to have to reach out to an amateur, Walter White, in hopes of rebuilding everything that he lost with the cartel. And he's most likely going to lose Kim in the process, and it looks like Kim's not going to be too broken up about walking away from Saul. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't be afraid to like and share it. If you want to be sure to catch all my videos on Better Call Saul, go ahead, subscribe, ding the bell, and you will be alerted every time I upload a new video. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.